So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. This is the first time we've been able to do this event since COVID, but we're very excited. This is the most important event in the entire portfolio of what Morgan Adams Foundation presents, because it gives us the ability to really share with you the impact of everything that we do all year long. So thank you. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Joan Slaughter, and I am the co-founder and executive director of the organization. Morgan Adams Foundation started after my oldest daughter, Morgan, was diagnosed at the age of 5 with a highly malignant glioblastoma brain tumor. She was an ordinary kid going to kindergarten. She would get a little bit sick. We thought maybe she's getting the flu because she hadn't really been to school very much. So we would bring her to Children's to get rehydrated. And on December 10th, when we brought her in, she presented with a tumor the size of a golf ball in her ventricle. She was immediately put into the ICU, and she went through, over the course of her treatment, she went through multiple brain surgeries. At the time in 1997, the research and the treatment for kids with brain tumors was in its infancy. My father was an adult neurosurgeon, and I was like, get us out of Denver. He did a lot of phone calls and talked to a lot of colleagues and said, you don't want to get out of Denver because one of the main guys in pediatric cancer research for brain tumors is actually in Denver at Children's Hospital, Colorado, Dr. Nick Foreman. So I thought he was kind of crazy, I have to be honest, because at the time you think of Denver, you don't think of it as an epicenter for research, and especially not for pediatric cancer research. That's what we've had the privilege of being a partner in building. Morgan went through multiple surgeries. Nick put her on multiple protocols, high-dose chemotherapy regimens that were particularly devastating for small kids. He did everything that he could to try to save her. She battled for 11 months, and she passed away in November of 1998. I've learned a lot about grief in my life, and through this last 24 years. I know that some people need to withdraw into themselves and shut the world out. That's the kind of griever that I am. Some people, though, are called to action and they want to make a difference. And that was my late husband. So Stephen jumped right in soon after Morgan died, and frankly, much too soon for me. He decided that we needed to figure out a way to help Nick find better treatments for kids with cancer, period. He said to me at one point, we need to do more for him than just give him a tie at Christmas and show him how can we help. Nick said we need to build a better bench science program. We need to invest in the new ideas that are going to be able to be driven to clinic and have a real impact on our kids. So in true Stephen fashion, he said that's what we're going to do. He jumped in, he started a fundraiser, and our first ARTMA art event was born. That first year we raised $100,000. It was an outrageous amount of money for a group of people that had never fundraised before in their life. And it nearly killed me. I swore I would never do it again. And then we did. And we raised $125,000. And it nearly killed me. And I swore I'd never do it again. Really, I'm never doing it again. And then Stephen said, okay, we'll make it a biennial, fine. We'll do it again in a couple of years. You'll feel better, you'll be ready. And then he went out and promptly started a car show. Now, 20 years later, we will be celebrating the concourse events anniversary and ARTMA, and we will be approaching $10 million in funding for pediatric cancer research. It's a very exciting milestone, and we are thrilled to have you all here along with us and having made that possible. The research studies that we've been participating in have had a significant impact on the kids that Nick and all of his colleagues have been treating. There are kids now who are cured and are curable that were not 20 years ago. The problem is a lot of them have long-term difficulties and lifetimes worth of illnesses and complications as a direct result of the treatment that was used to cure them. Our goal is to help develop treatments that leave our kids intact and able to have long, productive, and healthy lives. In addition to that, there are still certain types of cancer for kids that are still completely incurable or very nearly so. The type of brain tumor that Morgan had, she had about a 10% chance of surviving it back in 1998. If she were diagnosed today, she'd have about a 10% chance of surviving it. So our second goal is to make sure that those kids who still don't have 100% or 80% chance of being cured get that during the course of our lifetime. So that's what we're here to talk about today. We want to share with you a little bit, because we haven't done this event in a while. Meg's going to walk you through the sort of a high level overview of what the research pipeline looks like, where Morgan Adams Foundation dollars are spent, and how we help Nick and all of his team drive us closer to cures for all of our kids. After Meg talks, Nick will come up and share with you a little bit about the journey of developing what it looks like to develop an infrastructure for biomedical research. Then a friend of ours, Dr. Adam Green, who's one of the other pediatric neuro-oncologists, will come up and share a little bit about his research. The cool thing about our program, we have a lot of investigators that both are in the lab and also have clinic time. So Adam will be able to talk with you not only about what does it take to start ideas in the lab and work with his team there, but also what it takes to drive those through to the clinic, which is something that he's working on currently. After Nick and Adam speak, we have the distinct privilege of showing a video of two of our ambassador kids who are both from the same family, both of whom were diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma as young adults. We'll show a little video of them, and then their mom, Alison, will join us and share more about their journey. Lastly, I'll be happy to introduce to you John Dudasch, our board president. He'll share his own family's journey with cancer, and he'll tell you why, even after all these years, he still serves on our board. So it's a full morning. We're really glad that you're here. We're super excited to be able to show you not only how your dollars are at work through the presentations that we're giving, but also by taking you into the lab. This is about all of our kids. And then it's my pleasure to introduce you to Meg Periman, our communications marketing manager, and also my niece and Morgan's cousin. Thank you.
Good morning. As Joan mentioned, I am her niece and Morgan's cousin. I have been involved with the foundation since its inception. I started as a teenage volunteer, emptying trash at events, and have been doing marketing and communications for about 6 years now. It is obviously very close to heart, the mission that we have, and it's an honor for me to be able to do what we do and help kids with cancer. So as Joan mentioned, we're going to walk through what we do here at Morgan Adams Foundation and how your support helps kids with cancer. So first, to start off, just a few statistics that you may be aware of or maybe not. So pediatric cancer is the leading cause of death by disease in kids. Every day in the United States alone, 47 kids are diagnosed with cancer. Despite that, a very small portion of the government's research budget goes to pediatric cancer. So that means that nearly all of the advancements and new treatments that are made for kids with cancer is coming from the private sector. That is organizations like the Morgan Adams Foundation, and more importantly, supporters like you. So this is why what we do, what you make possible, why it matters. So we've got a bit of a pancake theme going today. So we're going to show you how your support stacks up for kids with cancer. I'm going to start with laying out kind of the research pipeline. The first type of research that we fund is basic science. And that is research to expand knowledge about the types of cancer that affect kids. This is where new treatments, ideas come about and are proven in the laboratory. So researchers are studying how cancer forms, how it grows, how it responds to treatment. This is a lot of the research that we fund because it is difficult for researchers to get this funding, to start that idea from the ground up and move it forward. This is where good ideas start, and that's really what is super important about supporting basic science and what you do. The next step in the research pipeline is what we call translational research, which includes the studies that are needed to move basic science, those good ideas, toward the clinic. where the kids need these safer and more effective treatments. Morgan Adams Foundation, as Joan mentioned, is very unique in that we fund researchers who are also clinicians. So what the doctors are seeing in the clinic where they're treating the kids and dealing with their patients drives the questions that they take to the lab and the things that they're trying to solve toward. It's kind of a constant feedback loop, and it's a really unique thing that we have here at Children's Hospital Colorado that we're very proud of and excited that we're able to support and that you make possible. Translational research is the key step in moving those new ideas for treatments into the next step, which is clinical research. This is kind of the final step in the research pipeline where we're trying to get to. The goal of every idea that a researcher or a doctor has is to find a treatment that works really well in the lab, prove that it works in the, a model that mimics it, and then get into the clinical trial side where we're actually testing it in humans and trying to get that FDA approval. There are 3 primary phases of clinical trials that apply in this case. Phase 1 clinical trials evaluate the safety of a new treatment. Phase 2 look at how well a new treatment works. And phase 3 addresses if it's better than a current treatment option. And when you get to that point, then you're a whole lot closer to an FDA approval. So a little bit of history, prior to 2002, there were no clinical trial sites for phase 1 trials between the East Coast and the West Coast. Children's Colorado was established as a clinical trial site for pediatric cancer in 2002. And we are very proud that the Morgan Adams Foundation helped fund the initial money needed to get that process started. And the very cool thing about your support and how it matters is that there are currently 7 clinical trials open or opening this year because of support and research funded by the Morgan Adams Foundation. These are actual ideas that were taken in that basic science phase, moved through the translational research, and now are clinical trials. So they are treatments that kids are actively receiving because they are proving to work better. These are the 3 steps of the research pipeline that you make possible. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the other ways that your support also helps kids with cancer. This is the next pancake in the stack. There are dozens of types of cancer that affect kids. You've heard about them from medulloblastoma, ependymoma, different types of leukemias. And then within those types of cancers, there are lots of different subtypes. Because of that, that means that pretty much every pediatric cancer is rare. And for a lot of kids, there is not a clinical trial that applies to them. They don't have a treatment that is being tested right now. They've got a unique mutation or something along those lines that makes it very rare and hard to have that. So this is where off-label treatment comes into play. Basically, this is where a medication that was approved or a treatment that was approved to treat a different type of cancer or a specific genetic mutation is given to a child who it's going to help. Off-label treatment is very important for kids with cancer because of how rare they are. And sometimes off-label treatment, this medication that was approved for something else, is the only chance a child has at having an extended lifetime or even the possibility of a cure. So another very important way that the Morgan Adams Foundation helps and your support makes possible is by providing financial assistance for pediatric cancer families. This is a daunting stat, I think, but it's important to understand that the National Health Institute has calculated that the average cost of a childhood cancer diagnosis and treatment is $800,000 over the course of that experience. A majority of pediatric cancer families, a parent has to leave their job entirely, or they have to cut back on the hours of their job to be the caregiver for their child, to go to them with appointments, to be with them when they're doing inpatient chemo or things like that. And as you might imagine, when expenses are going up and income is going down, that is not a recipe for success, and is also something that's going to cause more stress at a time when they're already dealing with their child's cancer diagnosis. So in April of 2020, the Morgan Adams Foundation started a financial assistance program to help families It was a need that existed before, but the COVID pandemic really brought home the importance of that and how people were struggling. And since that program started in April of 2020, we have provided over $100,000 in financial assistance to 33 families. It's a drop in the bucket for sure, but every little bit helps when we can maybe give a family a little bit of a reprieve so that they can focus on helping their child get through treatment and survive cancer and alleviate some of the stress of those bills that are probably adding up. Okay, I think this is the final pancake in my stack before I turn it over. So technology is really important. And as you might know, just in the past 20 years, you've seen quite a evolution of technology. And that is absolutely true in the case of pediatric cancer research. So technology has enabled more sophisticated means of studying and understanding pediatric cancer. And your support means that the researchers in the lab have cutting edge tools that they need in order to develop new treatment ideas and safer, more effective treatments. Just a quick run through. These are just 3 of kind of the sexy looking machines that we've funded. On the left, the IsoSpark helps researchers understand how immune cells function in response to cancer treatment, which is a really big topic. The flow cyte in the top middle there is a flow cytometer that detects and measures cancer cell characteristics. And then the bottom right is a TCAN digital dispenser that really eliminates just a huge chunk of manual work for our researchers and maximizes their efficiency and accuracy. So this is kind of just a quick overview of the fact that what you're enabling runs the gamut. And all of it comes back to make this big stack. And we're going to add to that stack a little bit more. And I am going to now turn it over to Dr. Nick Foreman, who's going to talk to us about what it was like when he first started.
I look a lot younger in that photo. Josh, who's the kid there, actually runs a business up in Greeley and is, I think, approaching 30. So when I first came here, I'm just going to talk about what it was like then and what it's like now. When I came here in '95, I actually came with Andy, who's back there, who's handsome there. So there was really no organized clinical or research program at Children's, or indeed in the Rocky Mountain region, for children with brain tumors. If you wanted your child to have, to actually see a neuro-oncologist, someone who specialized in children with brain tumors, you essentially went to the coast. And there were 3 other centers in the US at the time that actually really dealt with it. So, and what was known about pediatric brain tumors? Very little. I mean, we knew that they were completely different to adult brain tumors. We could recognize them down a microscope. And we'd started to actually tell that we'd actually got the naming of quite a few of them wrong. But we knew almost nothing about the biology. So when I came here, it wasn't a question of just establishing a clinical program. My aim was really to establish a program which actually drove forward the knowledge of brain tumors and actually led to advances in cure. And the vision was there, even though there was only just Andy and I. So the first thing I did was I said, well, we need to start collecting samples. Believe it or not, this really was something that people really hadn't been doing for brain tumors. So actually, I went to the first 300 brain tumor operations at Children's myself and collected a sample and had to actually drive it across town because Children's and University were at different places at the time for Andy. So that was really, I think, the signal thing that I actually did. And once you get samples, you not only need to actually get a sample, you need to think ahead of what you're going to do and think, we don't have the technology, but if I had the technology, what would I do with it? So a good example of that is, we didn't have the technology to look at single cells, to take a single cell and look at the whole genome in a single cell. Important because cancer in a child, actually the cells vary across the whole tumor, and you have to know about what all the individual cells are doing. And so we could actually say at a very early stage, we're going to collect samples which we can now use for single cell analysis, which actually led to us being the first center that really could do this for children when the technology came along. So the whole thing really involves not just collecting samples, but collecting the right one. When you have the samples, it's easier to recruit great people. You could phone up Rajiv and say, Rajiv, you want to study medulloblastoma? I have all the samples. Where you are doesn't have any. You need to come here. You need to come here because we have the stuff that you can work with to advance the field. As a result of that, we actually have a whole group of researchers who specialize in different areas of brain tumors. And there are now, instead of Andy and me, there are 7 people who lead labs and 35 researchers in the lab for that. This not only drives discovery, it drives directly clinical trials, because you can get information off them, off the samples, which have allowed us to move away from just the old fashioned, we give you radiation, we give you poisonous therapy, we actually towards targeted therapy directed at specific tumors. And those therapies are now a reality, not for all children, but for many of them. And we have driven that not only locally in terms of setting up clinical trials, we have actually driven it nationally by opening clinical trials driven by research out of our labs. This changes and is changing how we approach pediatric tumors. We are trying increasingly to move away from our radiation and chemotherapy with all their long-term side effects. This has been an honor and a privilege to lead over it since '95. It would have completely been impossible without Joan and Morgan Adams. Nobody gave us the money to collect those samples. Nobody gave us the initial money to set up labs. When I was actually collecting the tissue in a little canister like that, with liquid nitrogen in and moving it in my aged car, which I still have in '95, all of that was funded by Joan. All of the advances in technology when it came along, and I could go to Joan and say, we need this technology in order to do this new analysis on samples. Joan and Morgan Adams were there for us. We do actually get national funding. We're actually probably the best nationally funded group in the country. But that funding is really because of Joan. Because the way that funding works for the NIH is you basically get the funding if you actually have lots of data already. They're not going to give you a single cent unless you can actually prove you can do something. You need to leverage upfront. Joan provided the money for leveraging, which enabled us to get the initial results, the initial data, to get national funding. Literally, the way I think about it is Joan is entirely responsible for the fact that we not only still have funding from Joan to actually do new stuff, not just do old stuff, but our current funding from the NIH, which does run about 8 million a year, is entirely due to Joan. And we probably cannot actually go and get that money going forward without her. It drives research. And the research from the group changes lives. One of the great honors is just knowing what's happened to Josh. Meeting people. I think the last one I met served me coffee down in the hotel. It's actually turned out to be one of my old patients. All these people that we have done things to who look okay. One of the things that I do is I still do the long-term clinic, and I still see people who have been hurt by our therapy. And I know every time I look at a child that's hurt, I realize that we need to change the therapy. We need not only the cure, but we need to make sure the kids have really good lives. And that is what Morgan Adams funding is all about.
Thank you so much, Dr. Foreman. He didn't show you this fantastic picture of Andy Donson in 1996 on borrowed lab space. This was back in the early days. So he also told me that he was going to leave the pancakes to me. So I'm just going to add this to the stack. And now it's my honor to introduce Dr. Adam Green, who is going to talk about collaboration.
Great, thanks so much, Meg. It's an honor to be with all of you this morning. So I'm Adam Green. I'm one of the pediatric neuro-oncologists. And as Meg said, as many of us do, I do both care of our pediatric brain tumor patients in the clinic and research on pediatric brain tumors. And one of my major role models in all this has been Nick Foreman. So it's an honor to follow him too. I remember being a resident in the kind of the mid to late 2000s and seeing Nick really do it all at that point. He was the pediatric neuro-oncologist at Children's Hospital and doing as much, now there are 6 of us who do that clinical care and research, and he was really doing all of that at the point. So he is quite a legend. I still wonder how he does what he does now with all his incredible research prowess in clinical care and leadership. And so we all really follow in his footsteps. But Morgan Adams, since I started here as a faculty member in 2014, has been kind of the central driving force of what we're able to do in research as a pediatric brain tumor program. I think this will be the last cool pancake animation in my slides, at least. This is all Meg. I also don't have any pictures of sexy machines. But I do have these. So my work is in pediatric high-grade glioma, so these are very aggressive brain tumors in kids that arise from glial cells. These are the supporting cells in the brain, and they're the most common cells that form tumors. But high-grade gliomas, so these are cancerous tumors. As a fellow and a trainee in this field, we treat cancers of all kinds in kids, leukemias and solid tumors and brain tumors. And so by the time I saw my first high-grade glioma patient, I had initial talks, what we call the day one talk in pediatric oncology, where we're telling a patient and a family that they have cancer and this is what we're going to do about it. And usually by that time, those are actually very hopeful discussions because families and kids have had a sense, usually by that point for a few days or a few weeks, that cancer is a strong possibility. They've met oncologists, they've had a biopsy, they've had other testing. And so by that point, you're confirming their worst fears, but you're also saying, now we have a name for this that we're fighting, and we have a plan for how we're going to cure this. And we're not always saying that it's definitely going to work. In fact, we can really never say that. But we're at least saying there's somewhere from a very strong possibility to at least some possibility that this is going to cure your tumor. And for pediatric high-grade gliomas in general, kind of one of the last cancers in kids where we're really not able to say that yet. And so when I discovered this problem, that spoke to me and said, this is what you need to work on in your research career to try to change that situation, to at least get these to the point where we can offer hope for a cure instead of just saying we can treat the tumor, but we know it's going to come back and we know your child is going to die of this eventually. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the progress that we've made with Morgan Adams Foundation's help to address this problem and get to that goal. Two kind of major subtypes of these tumors that we treat are what we call supratentorial high-grade gliomas. So we kind of think about these as like the more adult type glioblastomas that we've heard about in the news from John McCain and Ted Kennedy. And these occur in kids as well. They're very challenging to treat. And then there's this other type, these DIPGs or diffuse midline gliomas that are more unique to children. And these occur in kind of midline structures in the brain. So structures like the cervical spine or the pons or the thalamus. So structures that have very, very important kind of basic functions like how we breathe and swallow, speak. These are key functions in these areas that are impinged upon by these tumors. And so in our lab, we try to address kind of both these subtypes, really all subtypes of high-grade gliomas across that spectrum of kind of basic to clinical research that Meg mentioned. So one of the subtypes that we've addressed, there's a population of children who have had another type of cancer earlier in their life. And so either leukemias or other kinds of brain tumors who get radiation therapy to the brain as part of the treatment for those tumors of cancer. So we don't think about radiating the brain in leukemia, but actually the brain is a place where leukemia cells can hide out. And so we sometimes have to radiate the brain in leukemia. We often have to radiate the brain in other kind of brain tumors. But these are kids who fortunately have been cured by those therapies. And so they're cured of their previous tumor, and they're usually just kind of getting back to, getting their life back together. Often by this point, they're teenagers or young adults, kind of graduating high school, heading to college, getting a job, finding a partner. And then they get these, what we call radiation-induced gliomas. So these are high-grade gliomas that are actually caused by the radiation that we gave to cure the previous tumor. So think about, everything we deal with is tragic, but that especially seems cruel that you've had cancer, childhood cancer, you've been cured of it, and now because of the treatments, now you have a new high-grade glioma. So I saw a couple of these patients in my practice. Again, teenagers, young adults who then we have to tell, we know you've been through this before, but this time, we don't have a way to cure this. And it's devastating. And by virtue of the work that Nick had done to bank tumor samples over a long time, we had a set of these tumor samples that was one of the largest in the world. And so Morgan Adams Foundation gave us funding very, very early in my time here to just start to learn about these tumors. We didn't even know, kind of were these different from the high-grade gliomas that just occur spontaneously in kids? How would we go about, kind of starting to find weaknesses in these tumors that we could treat? And so that initial funding allowed us to do that work. It was pretty groundbreaking. And then we presented that work at a national conference. And after our presentation that John DeSisto, a longtime member of our lab, gave, a couple of scientists from St. Jude came up to us and said, hey, we're interested in these tumors too. We have a set of them as well. Can we collaborate? And so we started a really productive collaboration with the group at St. Jude. We also found a group in Germany who had a similar set of these tumors as well. And it led to this the paper in a big journal called Nature Communications. So you see John was the first author there. John Lucas is a junior scientist at St. Jude. You'll see many of our colleagues here in Colorado, Katie Doris, Steve Mulcahy-Levy, Todd Hankinson, Nick Foreman, Rajiv Vibhakar, who were all part of this work, Mike Handler, Todd Hankinson. And then Brent Orr is a senior scientist at St. Jude, and then I'm on there at the end. So this is a true collaboration that really established the landscape. So we did discover that these tumors are quite biologically different from the spontaneous high-grade gliomas that we see. We found medicines that have the potential to treat them. And we found out that there may be patients who we can potentially predict that they're going to be at higher risk for these when they get radiation for their original cancer. And so we published this paper, and now what we're working on is taking that original Morgan Adams funding. We've had subsequent foundation funding, and now turning it into, as Dr. Foreman mentioned, one of those NIH, large federal grants. We were 3 percentile points off from getting funded with our last proposal. And so we're hoping that we can take the critiques that we got. We're going to resubmit this fall, but the goal of that grant will be to, one, confirm that hypothesis and be able to predict the patients who are at risk for these tumors when they get radiation, so we can potentially prevent it from happening in the first place by altering the initial therapy for their original cancer. And then two, using animal models and cell culture models that we uniquely have in the world of these tumors at this point, to come up with a treatment regimen that we can then take to a clinical trial that'll be the first clinical trial for radiation-induced gliomas in kids. The other thing I wanted to tell you about very briefly is again, more collaboration and how we take an idea from the lab and now to an already open clinical trial. And so I mentioned diffuse midline gliomas and high-grade gliomas in general. We started studying a novel chemotherapy medicine called selinexor very kind of early in my fellow and faculty career. This was a drug that was already in early phase clinical trials for adult cancers, and we were interested in studying in pediatric high-grade gliomas again as something that might have potential to offer hope to these patients. So we really took it from the very basic research, so discovering that high-grade gliomas have a weakness to this particular drug because they overexpress a protein called XPO1 that basically takes proteins in cancer cells that kind of on the brakes of those cancer cells and kind of deactivates those proteins so they can't put the brakes on cancer cells. This drug restores those brakes, and finding that in high-grade gliomas, this is a potential weakness. So then we study this drug, how it works in our patient-derived cell culture models, patient-derived animal models. So very soon after we saw that they were kind of working in those models, we were able to take this through to an early phase clinical trial. So this was kind of very early work that we've done in the lab, basic work that became translational. Then we took to a phase 1 clinical trial. So again, establishing the safety of this drug in patient kids with pediatric brain and solid tumors. That was a national trial that I helped lead that was open from 2015 and closed in 2021, where we established the safe dosing of this tumor. And now this is what that's led to. So this is ACNS 1821. It's a complicated name, but it basically means this is a brain tumor trial that was kind of started, the concept started in 2018. It's a phase 2 trial. That's what the two means. So now we're actually looking at how effective this treatment is. So we're combining selinexor, this novel chemotherapy medicine, targeted chemotherapy medicine with radiation in newly diagnosed patients with diffuse midline gliomas, DIPGs, and other types of high-grade gliomas. So this is a trial that came out of our lab, and it's the lead clinical trial nationally. So about 200 hospitals in the US and Canada. That is kind of the one of the major ones offered to new patients with high-grade gliomas. So again, this all came from very early funding that we've taken to a national level, and it takes many national collaborators. It takes a whole lab and neuro-oncology group here to make this happen. And so this trial opened last year. We have already gone through several dose levels, and the combination is very well tolerated so far, and it's showing some early signs of working, and we're really excited about it. But we know that it's going to take more than just kind of one drug or one combination of drugs to offer hope for cure for high-grade gliomas. So this is a really complicated slide, but it's basically, this is the current therapy for another type of cancer in kids. This is high-risk neuroblastoma, which is not a brain tumor. It's a solid tumor of the peripheral nervous system, but one of the most common cancers in kids. And this was like basically the DIPG in the 80s, right? This was incurable. Patients who got diagnosed with this were told that there was really no chance of cure. And through iterative clinical trials that have added all of these different treatments over time, right, from chemotherapy to a strategy we call high-dose chemotherapy with autologous stem cell transplant or bone marrow transplant, surgery, radiation, immunotherapy, so basically taking the patient's own immune system and using it to attack their tumor, and then targeted chemotherapy. All of that has led to now the majority of patients with this cancer are cured. And so how do we do that in diffuse midline glioma? Again, it's going to take all of these treatments coming together. So thankfully, we have all of these investigators and people working on these things, even in this tumor here at the University of Colorado. So we have Sujata Venkataraman, who is working on taking patients' own white blood cells, engineering them to fight their high-grade gliomas, and then putting them back into their bodies to help fight those tumors. We have Nathan Dahl, who's working on epigenetics of high-grade gliomas and basically taking very unique biological weaknesses in these tumors and using those, exploiting those weaknesses against the tumors in really biologically fascinating and advanced ways. And again, we've done some work, so working with collaborators at CU Boulder who work on ultrasound. So basically, these are mechanical engineers interested in basically like the properties of ultrasound. But we've realized that if we apply ultrasound like we use in pregnancy to very specific parts of the body, we can actually temporarily open the blood-brain barrier, which is a major obstacle in treating brain tumors with chemotherapy. We can temporarily open the blood-brain barrier with this focused ultrasound to get drugs that would never be useful in pediatric brain tumors into these tumors to treat them. So again, putting all these things together is a way that we hope to kind of make this final step to be able to say, not only do we understand high-grade gliomas biologically, not only do we have very promising trials, but we actually have a regimen that offers hope for a cure. And so I'm actually going to a workshop with national colleagues this weekend where we're going to talk about this exact topic, how we pull these novel treatments from trials together into this type of regimen for DIPG and high-grade glioma. This is our whole team. So you see it's an enormous number of labs, it's an enormous number of scientists, physician scientists, lab scientists. It's neurosurgeons, it's pathologists, it's clinical researchers, it's pathologists, it's radiation oncologists, but it's also the funding. And again, as Nick said, all the ideas that we're able to test, some of them take off, some of them don't, but the ones that take off and we're able to get these, multi-million-dollar NIH grants, those start from these smaller grants that were able to test these ideas through Morgan Adams, which to me is unique in the country. I don't know of any foundation that has this direct relationship with the center and the impact that you guys have. So your donations, again, are getting multiplied in what we do, and they're making a huge impact on our patients. And we're so grateful. Again, it's an honor to be with you all this morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Green. That was, I think, so illustrative about how collaboration and how it really just kind of brought everything together. So I hope that was meaningful for all of you. Now, please turn your attention to the screen for the story of the Schaffer family, who has unfortunately faced pediatric cancer twice.
Cancer is the worst thing ever, especially when it happens to your kid.
Cancer is a bully.
Cancer can happen to anyone.
Is just something no kid should ever have to go through.
Cancer is conquerable. I'm Alison.
I'm Peter.
Our kids are Lillian and Gavin.
I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma at age 17.
The doctor gave her a full exam and she said, it's really hard to believe because you've been functioning at such a high level. And she turned around the screen and she said, it's hard to believe that you have a mass the size of a football in your chest.
And all of a sudden, the whole world's upside down, just like that. And you're marching down this hall.
So they treated her with the most aggressive protocol, which was 6 months of chemo and radiation both. After Lily rang the bell, we had almost 2 years where her scans were all clean. She's moving on with her life, her hair's growing back. And then Gavin started to be sick.
Right in the middle of high school, I was diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. You never expect to hear those words. The chances of me getting the same cancer as her, let alone any sort of cancer, were just astronomical. I had 6 months of chemo, but I was one of very few kids who was able to avoid radiation.
In the 2 years that passed between when our kids started treatment, there was a study done. The protocol had changed for pediatric Hodgkin's high-risk patients who responded well to chemo to eliminate radiation entirely. And so Lily had radiation, and Gavin did not. That's the difference research makes, and we are in a unique position to see that between our 2 children, 2 years, research made that difference.
Lillian and Gavin unfortunately couldn't be here with us today, but I am very happy to share that Lillian celebrated her 23rd birthday earlier this month, and she will be graduating magna cum laude from the University of Denver next month with a major in studio art and a minor in math. Gavin is 18, and he just finished his freshman year at Mount St. Mary's, where he is a member of the Division I men's lacrosse team. And I am so honored to introduce Lillian and Gavin's mom, Alison.
Good morning. On my drive here today, I had a big lump in my throat because just the memories coming back to this campus, and Lily had radiation at Anschutz and finished 5 years ago this week. She finished her radiation, graduated, and went to prom. And then 3 years ago this week, Gavin at Children's had a biopsy behind his lung because we couldn't figure out why he had lost 45 pounds and had a fever and chills. And so just lump in my throat today. And, I'm lucky because my kids survived. So imagine how the families feel coming to this campus or any hospital, when they weren't as fortunate as we are. So the reason I'm here today is to explain to you all, I think personally, why my family is so invested in the Morgan Adams Foundation. Like you saw in the video, in the 2 years that passed between my kid's diagnosis, the treatment had changed. And it's hard actually for Lily to watch that video because she's happy for her brother, but she faces a lifetime of worry. She's at high risk for breast cancer, thyroid cancer, skin cancer. The complications from having had radiation will follow her whole life. And so when I heard Dr. Foreman talk about a world of pediatric cancer with no chemo, no radiation, I so wish for every family that was the case. Because really the treatment my kids had was from the 1970s, mustard gas derivatives. And again, when Gavin was in treatment, the good news was that not for him, but for subsequent kids, there was a clinical trial that had started for young adult Hodgkin's patients. So I'm hopeful that kids now who get diagnosed and go in there don't have as harsh a treatment as my kids had. And there's obviously work to be done. Both my kids have a friend right now. It's her birthday today. She's been inpatient a total of all but 20 days in this year. She has been home here and there, only 20 days in the whole year. Her mom has been at the hospital with her every night. And the financial impact that has for a family, I see firsthand. Before my kids were diagnosed, I volunteered at Children's Hospital on the oncology floor, which is very ironic. And I would be the person that did room visits with these kids whose parents had to work, and they're there in that room all day by themselves. So the fact that Morgan Adams Foundation funds these financial assistance programs for families, I think is very important. My family is 5 years, Lily's out of treatment. We're still fighting over medical bills. I mean, it's a nightmare for us times two, and so, we all so believe in developing treatments that are less devastating for these kids, and supporting and lifting up these families who you don't know till you know, and it's just devastating in every way. So we are proud to know Joan and to have a platform to kind of pay it forward, because like I said, we are very aware that we're the lucky ones, but there's a lot of work to be done. So.
Okay, good morning. For those that I haven't met, I'm John Dudasch. I'm the board chair of the Morgan Adams Foundation. And this is my kiddo. We found ourselves in August of 2010, right up the road, and received a diagnosis of a diffuse high-grade glioma. And as you heard from Dr. Green, that's a diagnosis with a really just a very poor prognosis. The odds weren't good. And when that happens, you find yourself in a situation where you're willing to go anywhere. We were similar to Joan. We were willing to go wherever we had to go to take her to get the best care that was available to us. And as it turns out, we didn't realize at the time, because why would you, unless your family's been touched by this? Why would you know that Children's Hospital in Colorado is one of the preeminent pediatric oncology research facilities, frankly, in the world? So we were fortunate in that we were able to get her the best possible treatment at home. And she actually withstood treatment pretty well. She did receive radiation, a lot of it, and withstood treatment overall pretty well until May of 2011, when she unfortunately relapsed. So we lost her in June of 2012. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm involved in the foundation, because as you heard from Dr. Green and Dr. Foreman, there's still work to do. And let's talk a little bit about why this event is important to us. When you talk about the Morgan Adams Foundation, and you're introducing the foundation to somebody that doesn't otherwise know us, and the first question is obvious, right? What does the foundation do? Well, we raise money for pediatric cancer research, right? Easy question, easy answer. Well, the next question is inevitably something along the lines of, well, tell me about what's going on in the research space, or what kind of projects do you fund? Well, as you get a sense from listening to Dr. Green and Dr. Foreman, that is a very, very difficult question to answer. And frankly, that second question is one that we don't often unpack at our other events, right? Our other events, we don't have an opportunity to do a presentation like this or to get into this level of detail. That's why this event means so much to us. And that's why your participation and your presence here means so much to us, because we actually have an opportunity to get into that second question and unpack that a little bit. And as you can see, it's a really tough one to answer. One of the things, and Dr. Green kind of touched on this, just on the business side of research, the major needle moving federal grants from the NIH and other entities within the federal government are extremely competitive, very, very competitive. And they have what's called a pay line. And if your application doesn't fall at or above the pay line, you don't get the grant. So you're not able to receive the funding. So that's actually the niche where Morgan Adams fills in, because you can't just have an idea or a hypothesis and go and land an NIH grant. You have to have a great deal of underlying science that actually proves out that your hypothesis is founded on solid science and solid data. That's where the Morgan Adams Foundation fits in, is we provide the seed project funding to create that underlying science that then enables the researchers, and it's a big team, right? I mean, you saw Adam flash this slide up. That's a big team. that group of people are the ones that we're funding. They're the ones that are conducting the seed projects that then lead to the needle moving NIH grants and grants from other major federal institutions. So I think it's just important when you hear Nick say that, you know, they're well funded and they've got $8 million in funding, you might think, well, gosh, you know, what's the point, right? They're already so well funded, and how does my gift of whatever size actually continue to move the needle? Well, it moves the needle because the grants that they've got that they're currently working on are in process. But guess what? This team of people is continuing to advance the science every single day. And it's the next grant and the grant after that continue to be important, in particular to families like mine, where we had generally a very poor prognosis when we showed up. And even today, I'm excited to hear about the clinical trial that Adam mentioned. That wasn't available to us back in 2010. So that's an example of how the research continuum is moving on, and that's where that is the projects that the Morgan Adams Foundation funds are critical enablers to creating and allowing the team to get those larger grants that lead to clinical trials. So I think so. Let's do some housekeeping here. So I want to thank the staff and volunteers that helped us. Great breakfast back there. Thank you guys for getting that set up. The QR code here is available to you. We welcome you to get involved in any way that you feel comfortable. Any way that, whether it's volunteering your time, whether, like Joan said, you know, her mission in life is to get in your checkbook. So any way that you're comfortable in being involved, we are honored to have you here, and we're honored to have you part of the foundation. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you got something out of today. You can tell that we're very passionate about what we do. We're very fortunate to have such a good relationship with the researchers here at Children's Hospital of Colorado. And none of this would be possible without your continued help and support. So thank you.